So I'll start by introducing myself. As Philippe said, I'm from Malta. It's a very small island, part of EU. I'm a security researcher. I've been doing research for the past, I guess, 10 years now, and doing penetration testing on my own. So I'm using the name of Enable Security sometimes. And yeah, these are different projects that I've worked on: Vicious, VoIP, which is commercial, and VoIPscanner.com, which is like a software as a service. And I also do research when it comes to web application security and other areas. I don't like to limit myself. And besides, when it comes to voice over IP, you get web applications, you get all sorts of different other protocols. So this is the agenda for the rest of the presentation. How many of you are familiar with how SIP works? Show hands. Not many, so I'll just introduce SIP. I guess, how many of you are familiar with HTTP? More hands I help? Yeah. So I'll compare it to HTTP. And yeah, we'll look at how SIP scanning works, what we can do but when we don't have access to layer 2, so we're not man in the middle or we cannot sniff SIP, but we can still do a lot of attacks. And we will also look at what the actual attackers are doing, so we won't just be talking theoretical stuff, but we'll be looking at what sort of attacks, what sort of scanning is going on, what sort of business models are being built on top of voice over IP vulnerabilities. So when it comes to SIP, it looks very similar to HTTP. You have methods, just like HTTP. In HTTP, you have post and GET requests. In SIP, you would have options, you would have register. I'm going to introduce those soon. It's mostly UDP. Not necessarily. In the case of Microsoft, they use TLS, for example, so it's over TCP, port 5061, but most of it is happening on UDP, port 5060, and you have two types of SIP entities. So you have the endpoints, which would be the SIP phone, or maybe an ATA, which connects your traditional phone to a SIP gateway. And then you have sort of servers. So you have two types of servers, a registrar and the proxy. And the registrars allow your endpoints to register with the registrar server, which keeps a list of registered extensions. So in the case of a registrar, you would have an endpoint, and the endpoint would tell the registrar, hey, any phone calls for this extension, say extension 123, send them over to my IP address, send them over to this port. And whenever someone tries to call someone else on the same SIP registrar network, they would look up they would connect with the registrar and find out who to contact. In the case of a proxy, the proxy allows SIP endpoints to communicate with other networks. So a PBX would usually be both a registrar and a proxy. It allows you to register with it, and it allows you to make phone calls, say, to a mobile phone number. So it would proxy your phone call. And you have different methods. Invite is what most people would be interested in, making phone calls. So invite causes phones to ring. If you send an invite to a proxy server, it will try to call some other phone. Register, what registrars support. And options gives you a list of supported options, very similar to HTTP. This is how a SIP message would look like. So you have the method, you have the, instead of a path, in HTTP you would have a path after the method. In SIP, you have a SIP URI. And then you have a couple of headers. Most interesting would be the to and the from. Oh, I inverted them. Whoops. You have the body, which is in SDP, yet another protocol. And in the body, you would have, in an invite message, you would have details on how to send the media, how to send the voice, the sound, or the video, maybe. So you would have an IP address or a host name, and you would have a port and other details like the codec to negotiate and so on. So any questions about the protocol? So if you want to scan SIP, since it's mostly over UDP, the idea is very basic. If you are scanning on TCP, you would have to set up a connection, you'd have to do what Nmap does, send SYN packets and so on. In UDP, you can just go ahead and send your message without having to set up the connection. So what one can do is one can send a message, and if something comes back, then it means that on port 5060 and it makes sense, it's a SIP response, then it means that you have a SIP server or SIP endpoint listening there. And you don't need any raw sockets, you don't need to handle all sorts of things. It's very simple programming here. So this would be a very simple example. You would send an options message, you'd get 200 OK, then you know that there is